Story 1. The first time I heard her knock, I thought it was part of a dream. That's how urban legends begin. Quietly. Not with screaming, not with shadows, with something small enough to dismiss. 3 soft taps. That's all it ever is. Not pounding, not frantic, just patient. 3 taps. I had just moved into apartment 5B at Crestview Residences when it started. The building wasn't special. 8 floors, dim hallway lighting, beige walls that had been repainted too many times. The kind of place people move into without expecting to remember it later. The first knock came at exactly 2:17 a.m. I know the time because I checked my phone seconds after it woke me. I didn't sit up immediately. I just lay there, staring into the dark, listening to the echo fade into silence. Then came a small voice. "Can I come inside?" Not loud, not whispering. Just close. Too close. I told myself it was someone's television. Thin walls carry strange things at night. But I couldn't hear footsteps. Couldn't hear a door open or close. Just silence pressing against my apartment. I didn't answer. The voice didn't repeat itself. I stayed awake until nearly 4 in the morning. The second night I didn't fall asleep easily. Something in me was waiting. My body felt tense, like it knew what time was approaching even before I looked. 2:16 a.m. My phone screen glowed in my hand, and right on cue. 3 taps. The knock was slightly firmer this time, not louder, more deliberate. My throat went dry. I didn't move toward the door. I didn't breathe. Then came the voice again. "Can I come inside?" There was something wrong with the way it asked. Not threatening, not desperate, just rehearsed. Like a line practiced too many times. I forced myself to get out of bed. I walked slowly across my apartment, the floor cool beneath my feet. The hallway light outside my door cast a thin shadow through the crack beneath it. I leaned toward the peephole. The hallway was empty, completely empty. No movement, no shifting light, no reflection. But the breathing was still there, faint, right outside the door. I stepped back. "Who is it?" I asked. The breathing stopped. The silence felt heavier now. And then, "It's cold." The voice had moved lower, almost below the peephole, as if whoever was speaking had lowered their head. I didn't answer. The knocking didn't return that night. But at 2:17 the following evening, before I even checked the time, I felt it coming. It's hard to explain that part. It wasn't sound. It wasn't sight. It was a shift in the air, like the apartment inhaled. Then, 3 taps. This time I opened the door. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe anger. Maybe because the repetition made it feel predictable. Safe. The hallway lights flickered softly, and at the far end of the corridor, near the stairwell, stood a girl. She couldn't have been older than 9. Long, dark hair hung wet against her shoulders. Her nightgown clung to her knees like it had been soaked. Her bare feet left faint, damp marks on the carpet. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at my door, at the space where it had been closed moments earlier. Then she slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were wrong. Not glowing, not black. Just unfocused. Like she wasn't looking at me. She was looking through me. "Can I come inside?" she asked again. Her lips barely moved. Her voice didn't echo down the hallway. It sounded like it came from directly behind me. I stepped backward instinctively. The hallway lights dimmed further. She didn't walk. She didn't blink. She just stood there, waiting. That was when I realized something worse than fear. She hadn't knocked from outside. She had knocked from wherever she was standing now, which meant she didn't need the door. And at exactly 2:18 a.m., she vanished. Not faded, not ran, just gone. The damp footprints remained, leading from my door, back toward the stairwell, but never quite reaching it.
After she disappeared, I stood in the hallway for several seconds before realizing my apartment door was still open. The corridor felt longer than before, quieter. The air smelled faintly of something metallic, like old water pipes or damp concrete. The footprints were still there, small, bare. Darkened patches pressed into the carpet fibers. They led away from my door, but they didn't continue all the way to the stairwell. They simply stopped halfway down the hall. Not faded. Stopped. Like the person who made them had stepped out of existence. I closed my door and locked it. Then I locked it again. That night I didn't sleep. At 2:17 the next morning, nothing happened. No knock, no voice. But I felt something worse. Disappointment. The feeling unsettled me more than the knocking ever had. I shouldn't have wanted it to happen again, but I did. The third night I didn't wait in bed. I stood near the door with the lights off. The clock ticked closer. 2:16. Silence stretched tight. Then, 3 taps. But this time the knock didn't come from the outside of the door. It came from the inside. From my side. I stumbled backward. The sound had clearly come from the wood panel behind me. Slow. Measured. Like knuckles against hollow space. "Can I come inside?" The voice was directly in my living room. I turned. The apartment was empty. The kitchen light flickered once. The air felt damp again. And then I saw it. Water was pooling near the base of my bedroom door. Not pouring, not flooding, just spreading thinly across the floor. I approached slowly. The surface of the water wasn't still. It rippled slightly, as though something beneath it had just moved. The knocking returned. 3 taps. From inside the bedroom. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't gone in. But something was already there. My phone buzzed in my hand. The screen showed 2:17 a.m. A new notification appeared. No sender. Just text. "You opened the door." My breath caught. I hadn't invited her in. I hadn't said yes. But I had opened the door. And maybe that was enough. The bedroom door creaked slightly. Water seeped farther into the hallway. Then I heard footsteps. Soft. Bare. Moving slowly across my bedroom floor. Stopping. Right at the other side of the door. "Can I come inside?" she asked again. The question had changed. She wasn't asking to enter my apartment anymore. She was asking to enter something else. Something deeper. I backed away until I hit the living room wall. The lights dimmed. The hallway outside my apartment flickered under the doorframe. 3 taps echoed again. But now they were coming from multiple places. The walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath my feet. The entire apartment knocking. In rhythm. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. The water began climbing, not rising, climbing, up the walls,
spreading in thin streaks toward the ceiling. My reflection appeared in the darkened television screen. But it wasn't just me. Behind my reflection, I saw her standing in the bedroom doorway. Closer now. Her hair hung over her face. Her nightgown clung tighter to her frame. Water dripped from her fingertips. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel her standing there. Cold. Still. Waiting. "You opened the door," she said quietly. "You looked." Her voice sounded older now, less childlike, less rehearsed. "You noticed." The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. The water retreated suddenly, vanished into the walls. The lights snapped back to full brightness. The apartment looked normal again. Except the bedroom door was open, and the carpet inside was completely dry. No footprints, no dampness, nothing. I checked the time. 2:18 a.m. The next morning I packed my things. I didn't speak to management, didn't file a complaint, didn't ask questions. I left. The apartment is still occupied. New tenants move in every few months. The legend continues. I know, because sometimes, at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone lights up. No number, no caller ID, just a voicemail notification. The message always contains the same thing. 3 soft taps. Then a small voice asking, "Can I come inside?" I never listened to the full message, because I know something now that I didn't understand before. She doesn't need doors. She doesn't need permission. She only needs to be noticed. And once you notice her, she remembers you.
Story 2. The story was already old by the time I heard it. Every city has one intersection people talk about in lowered voices, not because of crime, not because of accidents, but because of something that doesn't make sense. In my city, it's the intersection of Hallbrook and 9th. If you drive through it after midnight and the traffic light turns red when no other cars are around, you might see him standing in the crosswalk. He won't move. He won't blink. He'll just smile. And if you make eye contact, he follows you home. I didn't believe it. I work late shifts at a design firm downtown. Midnight drives were normal for me. Empty streets, blinking yellow lights, the quiet hum of the engine. I actually preferred it that way. No pedestrians, no traffic. The first time I saw him, I didn't recognize what I was looking at. The light turned red. I slowed down. No cars crossed the intersection. No headlights approached from either side. It was too quiet. Then I noticed someone standing directly in the middle of the crosswalk. He wasn't walking across. He wasn't waiting on the curb. He stood perfectly centered, facing my car. I assumed he was drunk or confused. He wore dark clothing, nothing remarkable. A long coat, hands at his sides. But his face, even from a distance I could see it. He was smiling. Not wide, not exaggerated, just enough to look deliberate. The kind of smile you hold when you know something the other person doesn't. The light stayed red. I didn't honk, didn't flash my lights. I just waited. He didn't move. The smile never shifted. Then the light turned green. He remained standing. I hesitated. There was enough room to drive around him, so I did. As I passed, I made the mistake everyone warns about.
I looked at him. Not for long, half a second at most, but long enough to confirm something was wrong. His eyes weren't focused on me. They were focused slightly behind me, as if he were looking into the back seat. I accelerated, didn't check the rearview mirror, didn't look back. When I pulled into my apartment complex garage, I felt ridiculous for being unsettled. It was just a guy, just a smile. But when I got out of the car, I noticed something strange. The garage lights flickered briefly, and for a split second I thought I saw someone standing at the entrance, watching. I locked my car and went inside. That night I dreamed of crosswalk lines stretching endlessly across dark pavement, white stripes that never ended. And at the center of them, a man smiling. The second time I saw him, I wasn't driving. I was walking. It was 12:32 a.m., and I had stayed too late at the office. I decided to walk a few blocks to clear my head before calling a rideshare. As I approached Hallbrook and 9th, the pedestrian signal flickered. The street was empty. No cars, no wind, no sound. Then I saw him again, standing in the exact center of the crosswalk. Same coat, same posture, same smile. But this time I noticed something new. He wasn't casting a shadow. The streetlights were working. Everything else had shadows, but beneath him, there was nothing. I stopped walking. He tilted his head slightly. The smile widened just a fraction. Not exaggerated, just enough to acknowledge me. "Go home," he said calmly. His lips barely moved. The sound carried clearly. I froze. No one else was there. The traffic light turned red, even though no cars were approaching. The pedestrian signal began counting down. He didn't move. He was standing in the center of the crosswalk while the signal changed. When it reached 0, the lights flickered. And he was gone. Not walked away, not turned. Gone. The next morning I searched for the legend online. Buried in old forums and archived message boards were posts dating back nearly 20 years. Descriptions matched perfectly. Late-night red light, man in crosswalk, smile, eye contact, and then being followed. Some said they saw him standing outside their apartment building days later. Some claimed he appeared at the end of their hallway at night. A few said they woke up to see him standing at the foot of their bed, always smiling, always silent, always closer. There was one common detail in nearly every post. He only appears after you look directly into his eyes. And once you do, he doesn't need the intersection anymore.
After the second encounter, I stopped taking Hallbrook and 9th altogether. I adjusted my route, left work earlier when I could, took longer streets home even if it meant traffic. For a few nights nothing happened. No red lights on empty roads, no flickering signals, no silent figures standing in crosswalks. I started convincing myself the legend had only power because I'd fed it attention. Urban myths thrive on imagination, on repetition, on suggestion. But legends don't fade just because you decide not to look at them. 3 nights later, I was driving home from the grocery store around 11:50 p.m. It wasn't even midnight yet. I wasn't near Hallbrook. I wasn't even downtown. And yet, the traffic light ahead turned red. There were no other cars. The intersection was small, residential, a place I'd driven through dozens of times without thinking. I slowed down. The air felt heavier. The engine seemed louder in the quiet. And then I saw him, standing in the middle of the crosswalk. Same coat, same posture, same smile. But now he was closer than before. close enough that I could see the details of his face. His skin wasn't pale, it wasn't discolored, it looked normal, but it didn't move. His smile didn't crease the corners of his eyes, his cheeks didn't shift. It was a shape placed onto a face, artificial, wrong. The light stayed red. I gripped the steering wheel. This time I didn't look directly at him. I stared straight ahead. If the legend was right, eye contact was the key. So I didn't give it to him. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw movement. He stepped forward. One slow step. The sound of his shoe against asphalt echoed louder than it should have. He walked toward my driver's side window. The smile never changed. I kept staring at the traffic light. The red glow felt suffocating. He stopped beside my car. I could feel him standing there. Close. Too close. Then, tap. 3 soft knocks on the driver's side window. My breath caught. It wasn't a pounding. It wasn't aggressive. It was polite, measured, intentional. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't turn, didn't move. "Look at me," he said calmly. His voice didn't come from outside the window. It came from inside the car, from behind me. The red light flickered, turned green. I drove, faster than I should have. Didn't check mirrors, didn't breathe until I reached my apartment garage. When I stepped out of the car, the fluorescent garage lights flickered in sequence, one by one, like something passing beneath them, moving, following. I rushed inside, locked the door behind me. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing in the crosswalk, smiling. The next day at work, I tried to focus, tried to drown it out with routine, emails, layouts, meetings. But at 12:17 p.m., the fire alarm went off. False alarm, we were told, but as everyone filed down the stairs, I froze on the 3rd floor landing. Through the glass exit door below, he stood in the crosswalk outside the building, in broad daylight. Cars were stopped. Drivers stared ahead, unaware. He wasn't blocking traffic. He wasn't casting a shadow. He just stood there, looking up at me, smiling. He didn't belong to the night anymore. I did something I shouldn't have done. I smiled back, just slightly. A nervous reflex, a challenge, a denial of fear. His smile widened. For the first time, it reached his eyes, and I saw what was behind them. Nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness, just depthless space, like looking into a tunnel that never ends. The fire alarm stopped. People began walking back inside. He remained, standing in the crosswalk, as if waiting for something. That night, the intersection changed. Every street I drove down ended at Hallbrook and 9th. Left turn, right turn, different neighborhoods, different blocks, all leading to the same red light, the same crosswalk, the same man. I tried reversing. The road behind me disappeared into darkness. I tried accelerating. The intersection remained in front of me. He stood in the center, smiling. The traffic light turned red. Then all lights went out. The city vanished. The only thing illuminated was the crosswalk, white stripes stretching into blackness, and him. He began walking toward me, slow, unhurried, each step echoing in the emptiness. "You looked," he said softly. "That's all it takes." I stepped out of the car. I don't remember deciding to. The door just opened. The air felt cold, still. The crosswalk stripes extended endlessly in both directions. "You don't belong to the road," I said. He tilted his head. "No," he replied calmly. "The road belongs to me." He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see my reflection in his eyes. But it wasn't me. It was a figure standing in a crosswalk, smiling. "You can stop it," I said. How? He asked. By not looking. He nodded slowly. Then close your eyes. I did. Not in fear, not in surrender. In refusal. The silence stretched. I heard footsteps circle me, felt cold air brush against my neck. Most people want to see, he whispered near my ear. They want to understand. I didn't move, didn't open my eyes. The ground beneath my feet shifted. The sound of traffic returned faintly, distant engines, wind, a horn honking. When I opened my eyes, I was back at a normal intersection, cars behind me, a green light above. No crosswalk figure, no smiling man. Just an ordinary city street. I drove home. Days passed. Weeks. I never saw him again. But sometimes when I stop at a red light late at night, I feel something standing just beyond my headlights. Not blocking the road. Not moving. Just watching. Waiting for someone else to look long enough. Because that's how the legend survives. It doesn't chase. It doesn't grab. It waits in plain sight. And the moment someone notices, it steps closer. Smiling.
Story 3. There is a building on the east side of the city that most people don't notice. It isn't abandoned. It isn't broken. It doesn't look dangerous. It simply stands where it has always stood, pressed between two taller office towers, its windows narrow and evenly spaced, its brick faded but intact. The building's name is Rivermark Flats, and there is one apartment inside it that does not face the street. It does not face another building. It does not face the sky. It faces a wall. A concrete wall so close that if you opened the window, your fingers would touch it. People say the apartment was never meant to be lived in, but someone always ends up living there. I didn't believe that part. I moved into 4C because it was cheap. That's the only reason. The listing said limited view. I assumed that meant a courtyard, maybe a narrow alley. It did not say concrete wall 6 inches from your window. The first time I pulled back the curtains, I thought there had been a mistake. There was no gap, no alley, just a vertical stretch of gray cement filling the entire frame. It was so close that it blocked most of the natural light. Even at noon, the room felt like early evening. I considered breaking the lease, but the rent was manageable, and I told myself I didn't need a view. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. The hallway outside my door had thick carpeting and soft lighting. The other tenants kept to themselves. I rarely heard footsteps, rarely heard voices. At night, though, the building felt different. Not louder, heavier, like it was holding something. The first strange thing happened 3 nights after I moved in. I was sitting on the edge of my bed reading. It was late. I remember the time clearly because I glanced at the clock. 12:43. And that's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound. Not at my door, not on the wall beside me. On the other side of the window. I froze. There was no space between my window and the concrete wall outside, no gap wide enough for a hand, no room for anything to stand. Yet the tapping came again. Soft. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 slow knocks. It wasn't random. It had rhythm. I stood up carefully and walked toward the window. The tapping stopped. The concrete wall outside was still, featureless, unbroken. No pipes, no ledges, nothing that could have made that sound. I told myself it was plumbing. Buildings make noise at night. Expansion, contraction, shifting temperature. I went back to bed.
The next night it happened again, but this time I was already lying down when it began. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. And then a faint scraping sound, like fingernails dragging slowly across cement. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The sound continued for several seconds, then stopped abruptly. Silence filled the room. And in that silence I noticed something I hadn't before. There was no echo. If someone knocked on a wall, even lightly, there should be some reflection of sound. But this tapping felt absorbed, contained, as if the wall outside wasn't solid, as if it were hollow. The next morning I asked the building manager about the exterior wall. He frowned slightly. "Which wall?" he asked. "The one outside my window." He hesitated. "There's an air gap there," he said. "Small maintenance space between buildings." "That's not what it looks like," I said. He gave a polite smile. "Old architecture can be deceiving." That night I didn't turn off the light. I sat in the chair facing the window, waiting. The clock read 12:43 a.m., right on time. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. This time I walked directly to the glass and pressed my palm against it. The tapping stopped instantly. The concrete wall remained unmoving. Then, very slowly, a handprint appeared on the other side of the window. Not on the concrete, on the glass, from the outside, pressed flat. The shape was unmistakable. 5 fingers, slightly longer than average, the palm wide. The print was wet. Condensation spread outward from it. I staggered backward. The handprint remained. Then another appeared beside it, and another, lining the glass from top to bottom, as if multiple hands were pressing against the window from the narrow space between my building and the wall. The tapping returned, now from all sides. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Over and over. The rhythm began to feel like breathing. In, out, in, out. I shut the curtains. The knocking didn't stop. It continued for nearly 10 minutes before fading away. The next morning the handprints were gone. The glass was dry. There were no marks, no scratches, no residue. Nothing to prove what I'd seen. I tried to rationalize it. Sleep deprivation, reflection, trick of light. But that explanation dissolved the following night, because that night, the knocking came from inside the wall behind my bed.
The knocking from inside the wall behind my bed did not sound the same as before. It was closer, duller, like something wrapped in fabric was pressing against the drywall from the other side. 3 slow taps. Pause. 3 slow taps. The rhythm was unchanged. That was the worst part. It wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was consistent, measured, patient. I didn't turn on the light. I lay still, staring into the darkness, feeling the vibration faintly through the mattress. The tapping stopped after a minute. Then something shifted inside the wall. Not a scurrying sound, not pipes. A slow drag, like someone adjusting their position. The next morning, I examined the wall carefully. There were no cracks, no discoloration, no bulging. It looked perfectly normal. When I pressed my ear against it, I heard nothing. But that night, at exactly 12:43 a.m., the tapping returned. This time I was prepared. I had moved my bed away from the wall. I stood in the center of the room when it began. 3 taps. Pause.
3 taps. Then, a voice. Muffled. Soft. Close. Move back. The words were faint but unmistakable. I didn't respond. I stepped closer instead. The wall felt cool beneath my palm, cooler than it should have been, as if it weren't separating me from another apartment, but from open air. The tapping stopped. Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, the paint began to ripple. Not crack, not peel. Ripple. Like something pressing outward from beneath it. The shape that formed was unmistakable. A hand. Fingers pushing against the surface, stretching the drywall thin without breaking it. The palm flattened against the inside of the wall, right where my bed had been. I stumbled backward. The shape remained, pressed there, still. Then another formed beside it, and another, until the entire section of wall was subtly shifting with pressure from the other side, as if something were standing inside the space between my building and that concrete wall. And it wasn't alone. The voice came again, clearer this time. You can see us. Not a question, a statement. The hand shapes slowly withdrew. The wall smoothed, returned to normal. The next morning, I tried to measure the distance between my window and the concrete outside. I leaned out as far as I dared. There was no visible gap, just gray cement, close enough to touch. But when I dropped a coin from the window ledge, I never heard it hit the ground. It didn't bounce, didn't clatter, it just disappeared. That night, I didn't wait for 12:43. I stood at the window with the curtains open. The room was dark. The concrete wall stared back at me. Time moved slowly. When the clock finally shifted to 12:43, nothing happened. No tapping, no voice. Just silence.
Story 4. There is a bus route in this city that technically doesn't exist anymore. If you look it up online, Route 66 was discontinued 12 years ago. Budget cuts, low ridership. That's the official explanation. But people still see it. Not during rush hour, not during the day. Only after midnight. And only when they are alone at a bus stop that shouldn't still be active. The first time I heard about it, I laughed. I work late shifts at a hospital, and sometimes the city buses are the only option when my car is in the shop. I've stood at more empty bus stops than I can count, staring at streetlights buzzing in the dark. You learn something about cities after midnight. They feel unfinished. Like they're between versions of themselves. That's when I saw the bus. It was 12:38 a.m. The air was still, no wind, no passing cars, just the hum of electricity from the street lamp above me. I was waiting at a stop that technically shouldn't have existed anymore. The sign was faded. The schedule board behind the glass was blank, the paper long removed. I was checking my phone when I heard the sound of an engine. Low, distant, approaching. I looked up expecting a rideshare vehicle or maybe a late-night delivery truck. Instead, a city bus turned the corner. Old model, the kind they stopped using years ago. Its headlights were dimmer than modern ones, yellowed, slightly uneven. It pulled up directly in front of me. The digital route display above the windshield flickered. For a second, it showed nothing. Then, the doors hissed open. No one stepped off. No one inside spoke. I hesitated. The hospital was only 10 blocks away. I could walk, but it was late, and I was tired. I stepped onto the bus. The interior lighting was soft, not broken, just muted. There were passengers inside, about 6 of them, all seated separately, all facing forward. None of them looked at me. The driver didn't turn his head when I passed. He wore the standard city transit uniform, but the fabric looked outdated, faded. I tapped my transit card against the reader. It didn't beep. The screen remained dark. The driver spoke without looking at me. "No need." His voice was calm, neutral, like he had said those words many times. I moved toward the middle of the bus and sat down. The doors closed. The bus began moving. At first, everything seemed normal. Streetlights passed by. Buildings slid past the windows. But after a few minutes, something felt off. The bus didn't stop at any intersections. Traffic lights were ignored. Other cars were absent. The city outside looked emptier than usual. And the passengers, they hadn't moved, not a single one. No shifting in seats, no phone screens lighting up, no adjusting posture. They sat perfectly still. I glanced toward the front display panel that usually showed the next stop. It was blank. The bus didn't feel like it was following a normal route. The streets began narrowing. The buildings outside looked older, less maintained, then unfamiliar. I leaned slightly toward the window. I didn't recognize where we were. The city grid I knew so well had dissolved into something quieter, something older. The bus slowed slightly. Not at a stop, just enough to make me aware of the movement. I stood up, walked toward the front. "Excuse me," I said to the driver. He didn't respond. Up close, I noticed something strange. The rear-view mirror above him wasn't angled toward the passengers. It was angled toward the back window, as if he were watching something behind us. I followed his gaze. The street behind the bus was completely dark. No lights, no buildings. Just empty roads stretching into blackness. I felt my throat tighten. "Where are we?" I asked quietly. The driver's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "End of the line," he said calmly. The bus stopped. Not at a marked station, not at a shelter. Just in the middle of a narrow street lined with buildings that had no windows. The doors opened. No one moved. The driver turned his head slowly toward me. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. His expression was neutral, but his eyes, they didn't reflect the interior lights. They absorbed them. "You can get off here," he said. I didn't move. None of the other passengers looked at me. They remained still, waiting. "For what?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly. "For where you're going." The doors remained open, cold air drifted in. But it didn't feel like outside air. It felt enclosed, like stepping from one room into another. I looked down the aisle. The passengers were no longer facing forward. All of them were now turned slightly toward me. Their movements had been silent, unnoticed. Their faces were calm, blank. But their eyes were open, wide, watching. I stepped back toward the exit. My foot hovered over the threshold. Something in my chest told me not to step down. The pavement outside the bus looked wrong, not cracked, not uneven, just flat, featureless, like unfinished ground. The driver spoke again. "If you stay, you ride. If you leave, you walk." "Where?" I asked. He didn't answer. The bus engine idled quietly. The interior lights flickered once. The passengers' eyes followed me, unblinking, waiting. I stepped back into the bus. The doors closed immediately. The engine roared slightly louder. The bus began moving again. No one returned to facing forward. They continued looking at me. And that was when I realized they weren't watching me. They were watching the seat I had almost left empty.
The moment I stepped back from the bus doors, the decision felt permanent. The doors closed with a soft hydraulic sigh. The bus moved forward. No one turned away. All 6 passengers remained slightly angled toward me, watching, but not with curiosity, not with hostility, with expectation. I sat down slowly in the nearest empty seat, the one I had nearly abandoned. The bus interior felt warmer now, almost sealed.
The windows had darkened slightly, muting the outside view. I tried to steady my breathing. The bus drove through streets that didn't feel mapped. Buildings passed that had no signage, no storefronts, no reflections in their windows. The city I knew had thinned into something skeletal. The driver never checked the mirrors again. He didn't need to. He knew I was still there. After several minutes, the bus slowed again, not stopping completely, just easing its pace. The overhead display flickered. This time, faint text appeared. Next stop, transfer. The word lingered for several seconds, then vanished. I leaned forward. Transfer to what? I asked quietly. The driver's voice answered, steady as before. Depends. On what? He didn't respond immediately. The bus turned down a narrow street. The pavement outside grew darker, the streetlights fewer. On whether you're remembered, he said finally. A chill moved through me. By who? The driver's eyes shifted slightly in the mirror, not toward me, toward the passengers. By anyone. Silence filled the bus again. I looked around more carefully. The passengers were different now. Subtle changes. Their clothing looked slightly out of time. Styles from different years, different decades. One woman near the back wore a hospital bracelet around her wrist. A man near the front had dirt beneath his fingernails. Another passenger stared straight ahead, lips moving faintly, as if repeating something silently. None of them blinked. The bus slowed once more. The doors opened again. This time, the street outside looked more familiar. Faintly, like an echo of somewhere I recognized. In the distance, I could see a hospital building. My hospital, but older. The sign above the entrance had a logo the facility had retired years ago. The bus idled. You can get off here, the driver said. The passengers' heads tilted slightly, in unison. The air outside the bus felt different. Not cold, not warm. Still, completely still. I stood slowly. My legs felt heavier than they should have. As I moved toward the doors, I noticed something unsettling. There was now one more passenger on the bus than before. An empty seat had been filled. The person sitting there looked vaguely familiar. I couldn't place it. Not a stranger, not someone I knew well, just familiar enough to unsettle me. I stopped walking. The driver spoke again. If you stay too long, you won't recognize where you belong. My throat tightened. What is this place? I asked. He finally turned his head fully toward me. His expression hadn't changed, but now I could see something deeper in his eyes. Not darkness, distance. This is where the forgotten ride. The words settled heavily in the air. The bus wasn't taking people somewhere. It was collecting them. People who were no longer anchored. People who slipped through something unnoticed. People whose absence didn't echo loudly enough. The passengers weren't trapped. They were paused, suspended, waiting for either memory or surrender. I stepped down from the bus. The pavement felt solid beneath my shoes. The hospital entrance ahead flickered faintly. The doors opened and closed without anyone touching them. The bus doors remained open behind me. I didn't turn around. I walked toward the hospital. Each step felt slow, thick, as if the air were resisting me. The building ahead looked close, but it didn't get nearer. The distance stretched. I stopped walking, turned slightly. The bus was still there, engine idling, the driver watching, the passengers unmoving, waiting. I understood something then. If I kept walking, I would never arrive. If I stepped back onto the bus, I would never leave. The space between the bus and the hospital was the decision. Not forward, not back,
but awareness. I closed my eyes, focused on something specific, a memory. The moment I stepped back from the bus doors, the decision felt permanent. The doors closed with a soft hydraulic sigh. The bus moved forward. No one turned away. All 6 passengers remained slightly angled toward me, watching, but not with curiosity, not with hostility, with expectation. I sat down slowly in the nearest empty seat, the one I had nearly abandoned. The bus interior felt warmer now, almost sealed. The windows had darkened slightly, muting the outside view. I tried to steady my breathing. The bus drove through streets that didn't feel mapped. Buildings passed that had no signage, no storefronts, no reflections in their windows. The city I knew had thinned into something skeletal. The driver never checked the mirrors again. He didn't need to. He knew I was still there. After several minutes, the bus slowed again, not stopping completely, just easing its pace. The overhead display flickered. This time, faint text appeared. Next stop, transfer. The word lingered for several seconds, then vanished. I leaned forward. Transfer to what? I asked quietly. The driver's voice answered, steady as before. Depends. On what? He didn't respond immediately. The bus turned down a narrow street. The pavement outside grew darker, the streetlights fewer. On whether you're remembered, he said finally. A chill moved through me. By who? The driver's eyes shifted slightly in the mirror, not toward me, toward the passengers. By anyone. Silence filled the bus again. I looked around more carefully. The passengers were different now. Subtle changes. Their clothing looked slightly out of time. Styles from different years, different decades. One woman near the back wore a hospital bracelet around her wrist. A man near the front had dirt beneath his fingernails. Another passenger stared straight ahead, lips moving faintly, as if repeating something silently. None of them blinked. The bus slowed once more. The doors opened again. This time, the street outside looked more familiar. Faintly, like an echo of somewhere I recognized. In the distance, I could see a hospital building. My hospital, but older. The sign above the entrance had a logo the facility had retired years ago. The bus idled. You can get off here, the driver said. The passengers' heads tilted slightly, in unison. The air outside the bus felt different. Not cold, not warm. Still, completely still. I stood slowly. My legs felt heavier than they should have. As I moved toward the doors, I noticed something unsettling. There was now one more passenger on the bus than before. An empty seat had been filled. The person sitting there looked vaguely familiar. I couldn't place it. Not a stranger, not someone I knew well, just familiar enough to unsettle me. I stopped walking. The driver spoke again. If you stay too long, you won't recognize where you belong. My throat tightened. What is this place? I asked. He finally turned his head fully toward me. His expression hadn't changed, but now I could see something deeper in his eyes. Not darkness, distance. This is where the forgotten ride. The words settled heavily in the air. The bus wasn't taking people somewhere. It was collecting them. People who were no longer anchored. People who slipped through something unnoticed. People whose absence didn't echo loudly enough. The passengers weren't trapped. They were paused, suspended, waiting for either memory or surrender. I stepped down from the bus. The pavement felt solid beneath my shoes. The hospital entrance ahead flickered faintly. The doors opened and closed without anyone touching them. The bus doors remained open behind me.
I didn't turn around. I walked toward the hospital. Each step felt slow, thick, as if the air were resisting me. The building ahead looked close, but it didn't get nearer. The distance stretched. I stopped walking, turned slightly. The bus was still there, engine idling, the driver watching, the passengers unmoving, waiting. I understood something then. If I kept walking, I would never arrive. If I stepped back onto the bus, I would never leave. The space between the bus and the hospital was the decision. Not forward, not back, but awareness. I closed my eyes, focused on something specific. A memory, a voice calling my name earlier that evening. A nurse asking for assistance in the ER. A coworker laughing in the break room. People who would notice if I didn't show up tomorrow. I held on to those details tightly. Concrete. Real. When I opened my eyes, the hospital looked newer, brighter, closer. The bus engine behind me grew quieter. The idling softened, then stopped. I turned. The bus was gone. The street looked normal again. Streetlights humming faintly. Cars parked along the curb. No passengers. No Route 66. Just an empty road. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 1:02 a.m. Several missed calls from work. They had been trying to reach me. I was late. Late enough that someone noticed. I walked the remaining blocks to the hospital. The building looked exactly as it should. Modern signage, bright windows, noise, movement. Inside, everything felt real, solid, anchored. But sometimes, when I leave work after midnight, I still see the old bus stops, faded signs that should have been removed years ago. And once, standing under one, I saw headlights turn the corner. Dim, yellowed, flickering slightly. I didn't wait to see the route number, because now I understand something about that bus. It doesn't force anyone aboard. It simply appears at the moment someone feels unobserved, unnoticed, unmoored. And it offers a quiet ride, no fare required. Just stillness. If you ever see Route 66 after midnight, don't step on unless you're certain someone would notice if you didn't step off again.